Today I spoke to Pierre Becerril of Transparent, which is a data insights company working in the Airbnb short-term rental sector, and with Ben Tannenbaum, who is the CEO of Transparent's sister company, Coworkintel, which works in the co-working sector. We spoke a little bit about what their companies do, how they acquire data, and what kind of scope there might be in the future for these kind of private companies working with so much data to work with governments. If you like the interview, don't forget to subscribe below. So hi Pierre, hi Ben. Thanks for being with us today. Could I start with a little bit about what both of your companies do? We'll start with you, please, Pierre.
Sure. So I'm with Transparent. We're a data intelligence company for the short-term rental markets. So we track basically everything that you can rent as a traveler that is not a hotel.
Okay, and Ben?
So we are doing a similar type of business, but focused on another vertical. So we focused on the co-working spaces world, and we are a market intelligence company focused specifically on this segment.
Okay, and how did you both get into the real estate data game? Do you have any particular background in it? We'll start again with Pierre.
So for me, it was maybe a little bit by accident. I used to operate a B2C company. So we were making packages for travelers to find the best accommodation on their holidays, together packages that with flights. So we built our own database of short-term rentals, and we basically realized we were sat on a gold mine, and the data was actually the most valuable part of our tech, and we decided to pivot and orient that towards benchmarking intelligence and data.
Okay, and the same question to you, Ben. I believe you two know each other and you've worked together.
Yes, I have a background originally as a data engineer, so I've been always working in this field. I also have a bit of a background in the real estate sector, so I was really intrigued by the growth of co-working spaces for a while. And yeah, we met Pierre and I in a hackathon in London. So we did some project together at this point. And then looking at Transparent, inspired by this type of business model and of ability to bring more transparency in a sector. Essentially, we brainstormed and we thought that providing this service to co-working spaces could make a lot of sense.
Okay, and both of your niches, so both co-working and Airbnb short-term lets, are two models which have gained more relevance, I guess, in the last few years. When did your company start up, and how have you seen the growth in the last couple of years, or however long it's been, Pierre?
Yeah, so it's interesting you choose the word niche, because I think today short-term rental is category itself. I think market share of short-term rentals within hospitality have kept growing, and what happened recently with COVID, it actually drastically increased the speed of short-term rental as a choice of accommodation for travelers. So I don't think it's no longer a niche. Actually, if you look at Airbnb's market cap or other large platforms like Expedia, Vrbo, and Booking.com, volume and gross booking in the space, you could say it's a really big and an important market. And I think it's been important for many years. It's just as really speed up in the last few years with the emergence of new technology that makes it really easy for everybody to book and have a great experience with these kind of accommodations.
Okay, and how about in the co-working space, Ben? As you can see here, I'm in my home office here, which is not that big. I imagine there's a lot of people like myself who have been looking for co-working spaces. Have you seen a real boom in the industry and in the demand for your services over the last 12 months since the start of the pandemic?
Yeah, I think before the pandemic, well, to start with, to take a bit of a step back, it's still a sector that can be seen as niche. As I agree with you, it's around 2% of the office in total. In the market where it's the biggest, like in London, it's about 5%. But there was a very strong growth even before the pandemic. Essentially on the back of the idea that co-working spaces are providing a better service than the office. So not just, some walls, but really a service, a sort of customer-centric approach of the real estate. So that was growing very fast before the COVID. Now, just like any real estate, or most real estate, if you put logistic on the side, it's been impacted, tremendously by the COVID. We publish some information about that available on our website. The occupancy levels have been from around 80% to 50% on the contract levels, not the physical one, just whether people have kept the contract. So that's a big drop, and it's been massively impacted. Now, yes, we do see it's the very early days of what's going to be the impact of the post-COVID, because we're still very much in the COVID. But we do see an impact of the work from home. It's true, and we do see a lot of potential, after. And yes, one of the big trends that we see is that, as you say, people are working from home. Not everyone has a really good setup to work from home, and therefore people have been looking at co-working spaces around themselves. So we do see some growth in the places that are not downtown big cities, but really in the sort of suburban areas and secondary cities.
Okay, I'm interested in specifically about data and how you use it. But first, how do you guys collect data? Do you work more with data that's readily available and you, let's say, clean it, analyze it, and the rest of it? Or do you have proprietary data collection methods? Yeah.
So for us, it's both. We scan everything that is publicly available. So, we have a global view of everything that is going on, and then we unify this data, we apply some machine learning to it, and basically, produce reports on top of it. And then we've got the second source, which is proprietary, like you say. It's basically private partnerships with software providers that allow us to connect to their software. So most of these softwares are, property management software, that operators, in our case, vacation rentals or short-term rental operators uses, and we can connect to them so we can aggregate data anonymously and then share it back to the industry as an index. I think the hard part there is that it's extremely fragmented, and that's why, technology like ours makes sense, because we can unify all of this and make sure that, data is kept safe and relevant.
Okay, and Ben, is it similar for you? Obviously the two niches, well, I won't use the word niches, obviously the two sectors are very different, but is it very much the same level of availability and, I guess, open source data for you guys as well?
Yes, so our core product is really based on private data. So it's similar to the hotel. That's a very big company in the US who's doing a similar approach for hotels. We really focus on private data that comes directly from operators. So technically, we actually connect to the system they use to manage the space. Those systems have an open access to the data called an API, and that's how we extract the data, and then we do benchmarking and anonymize it, and give access to the anonymized database to the co-working spaces and people who are interested in the sector. In terms of whether there is a lot of open source data, well, we really focus on the private data, so that's kind of where we are. And yeah,
it's interesting. So you're saying that most of the co-working operators have this data available via APIs. So you guys obviously have to partner with them. Do you have to pay for this data, or do they make it available to you for the benefit of better analysis?
So there's a bit of caveats there to mention. Technically, the way we collect the data, as I said, is by connecting to those management software, and not everyone in the industry is using a software. So some people kind of use a Google sheet or spreadsheet or other tools which don't really provide easy access to the data. But for the one who uses the software, yeah, we can easily collect that data. And then whether people, openly give access to it, that's, the question of trust. Obviously, this is sensitive data. We kind of had to demonstrate that we were going to be really careful about keeping the data anonymous. But the value that we provide to them is that we basically provide them with all the market research that they are doing when they are looking at what's happening in the market around themselves. They spend a lot of time doing that, and we kind of provide that in a really neat professional service. So they do submit data, but they get a lot of information in exchange, basically.
Okay, so on the subject of data being private or being made available publicly, the reason I actually came across your company, Pierre, Transparent, was firstly, the excellent work that you guys did making data public around the Airbnb IPO. Is that something that you would say is typical of the work you do? I mean, what is a typical request from a client? Would it be something like the work you did around that IPO?
Sure. So I think, the idea is that we're not really only in the business of data. We're more, about answering questions with data, right? So a lot of different players in the industry have questions, and we have different ways to approach that. So we can work with landlords, we can work with operators, we can work with hotels, want to understand how they compete with short-term rental. We can work with, travel agencies, with a lot of different players in the industry. So overall, the way we normally process is like we try to understand what are our clients' questions, and when we can see how to best answer that so they can make, the best business decisions. So in the case of the Airbnb IPO, we thought it would be interesting just to showcase the kind of things we can produce with our data and try to answer a general question that the industry had. And I think it was great feedback also to see, the investment community get interested into our industry. And we thought that was a good way to engage with them. So that was one of the reasons why we produced that.
Okay. Something I'm interested in is, I mean, obviously I deal a lot more with residential real estate, and I'm always reading things about how backwards the real estate industry is and how it's still a sector where these personal relationships are far more important than other things. And the industry is just now maybe getting to grips with data. Would you say that that has been the case in your, I won't use the word niche again, in your sectors, Ben?
That's an interesting question. I think there's certainly some kind of interrogation about sharing data, because you don't really know what's going to be done with it. But there's some areas of real estate where this sort of approach are really common. So if you look at the hotel industry, for example, sharing of data between operators is really mainstream now. It's nothing innovative anymore. If you look at other sectors like finance, who was very traditional before, now you have Bloomberg, which is seamlessly organizing a very big sharing data between participants. So these things take a little bit of time, and I think it's normal to not expect to build a product like this or a service like this in 2 days, because you need to build trust. I understand that. So you have to demonstrate that you're going to be here for the long term. So I don't know if it's backwards. I think it's so fair. I understand whether people have, doubts at the beginning, and you kind of need to demonstrate that you're serious about what you're doing.
Okay. One issue that obviously is very prevalent in the world of data is the issue around privacy. Now, without giving too much away, have you guys run up against any privacy issues or privacy walls? For example, do you use any like mobile tracking or anything like that? Has the landscape changed there as well, Pierre?
I mean, I think on our side, privacy is obviously a big priority, because we're in the data business. Imagine every business is now that runs online is really careful about data privacy. But when data is actually your business, I think you have to be extra careful, right? So, on our side, we only deal with anonymized data. I think just like Ben, so when we connect to PMSs, for instance, we're not gonna store that you, Edmund, stayed in this particular property for that length of stay, with this particular credit card. We would never do that. Everything is hashed. So we don't even store the data. It's hashed before it hits our servers. So, there's a number of mechanisms that we can employ to make sure that the data is properly anonymized. And then once we give it back to also our clients, we make sure that it's properly aggregated. And that's very important. So, we won't provide you the data so you can infer what other people are seeing as revenue or as occupancy or anything like this. So we always make sure that, we've a proper way to anonymize the data and then to aggregate it. Yeah. So those are just some examples. But in any case, we're also not into the business of storing any sensitive information about specific tracking or anything like this. We're looking into rate, occupancy, and this is mostly what we're focusing on. So the data privacy is more about our clients' data than anything else, right?
Yeah, very well answered, like a true CEO. The last question from me, we had a columnist for online marketplaces write us an article about basically saying that private companies such as property portals, such as data companies like Transparent and Coworkintel, are now, let's say, the de facto places to go for data, more so than governments. So private companies have maybe overtaken governments when it comes to data. Is this something that you guys have seen in your particular areas? Do you ever work with governments? And do you think there is maybe some scope to collaborate between governments and private companies to help the economy? We'll start with Ben.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. So statistics, the world statistics was, I think, created maybe in different parts of the world at the same time, but it was definitely sort of institutionalized in France. And in statistics, you have states. So this was created by the state to understand what is happening in the country. So it's true that data and especially comprehensive, collection and structured way of analyzing it, it comes from the state, from the government. Now, I don't think there is a reason for the state to have a monopoly on this. It's and it's probably a very good thing for everyone that there's competition in data providers and an effort to provide the best service possible. Now, could we work with? Now I'll add a caveat to that, which is that governments are already still providing some extremely helpful data. So in the US, as you know, you have the census, information which provides data on income, also anonymized in a very similar way as us, but provide very interesting information at a very granular level. And it's very difficult if you're not the state to have access to this kind of information because directly it's come from the tax, filling. So I think the state, by its kind of activity, has still access to some data that would be very hard to collect if you are a private company. So, and thankfully they will also give access to that. So I think they're really giving a huge service to society. Now, for this, the sectors or the activities that are strictly related to the functioning of the state, I think it makes sense to have private competition, and it's probably good for the end user in the end.
Okay. Would you agree with that, Pierre?
Yeah, I think that's right. We've had some experience working with governments and tourism boards and different entities that are attached to the government. So it's true that I think the innovation in what we're doing, benchmark is not new. There's companies like CoStar that have been doing it for a very, very long time in real estate. I think what we're doing here is basically automating it to be able to make it at scale in a fragmented market. Once there's few operators, it's much easier to do it, and doing it at scale with everyday changing information, it's much harder. And that's why we've got the power of APIs and technology to put it into motion into segments like short-term rental or Ben with the flex office market. So I think that's where the innovation is. And I think that for that kind of markets, it makes sense that there are competition and private players operating there.
Okay. Well, we'll leave it there.
I might add one point on the government that's specific to what is happening at the moment with the COVID. How could we work with government? There's something that where we've worked with government, and I think it's been helpful for them to have access to our data, which is, for example, co-working is a fairly innovative product in real estate. It's a new approach, providing more flexibility, providing a more customer-centric experience. It's new, and governments don't necessarily fully have enough data to really fully analyze that. And for areas, like, for example, Puerto Rico in the US, areas that are trying to attract people to work there, that have been historically fairly touristic, but that are thinking about, could we have people kind of staying there long term and working? We can provide that kind of information on, what are the things that could attract people to your area. And one of the things that will attract digital nomads or people in general who are kind of opening their mind about where you could live and work, related to the COVID and also before, we can kind of provide this information on these are the products that are innovative in real estate. These are the things that could attract those people in your area, and we can help you understand exactly what they are. So that's one of the ways we could think about working with governments.
That's an interesting point, actually. I hadn't thought of that. It's definitely a good way of seeing it. Guys, we'll leave it there. Pierre, Ben, thank you very much for talking to me today. I look forward to hearing more about Transparent and about Coworkintel in the future.
Cheers, Edmund. Thanks so much for that.
Thanks, guys.